Coming up, the toll of COVID-19 on Native health and its doctors. A new book chronicles the life of a tribal leader. Plus our series At the Crossroad looks at Ho-Chunk Gaming Enterprises in Wisconsin. I'm Mark Trahan, filling in for Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahan. Aaliyah Chavez is away. The Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma is investing millions of dollars to expand affordable housing. Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. signed into law a funding plan to spend a historic $120 million. Hoskin said now the real work starts.
I love today because of what we've begun to accomplish. Passing legislation, proposing it is not the end. The end is building homes. The end is building a brighter future. But we took a great stride today.
The funding will allow for affordable housing, low-income home repairs, and other housing-related needs for Cherokee Nation citizens. Officials say $60 million will be used to construct new homes. This will help shorten the wait times for applicants who are applying for the new program. Applicants will receive a new home on a rent-to-own basis with a 30-year payoff and a monthly payment below market rate. Another $30 million will be dedicated to home renovations for elders and for citizens with disabilities. After being displaced for nearly 400 years, another nation is getting its land back. The Rappahannock tribe in Virginia is recovering 465 acres of sacred land at Fones Cliff. The area is the ancestral home of the tribe, located on the eastern side of the Rappahannock River. It is now permanently owned by the nation and has been placed into trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Last week, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland joined the nation to honor the historic reacquisition. In a statement, Rappahannock Chief Ann Richardson mentioned the area's importance, saying in part, "We have worked for many years to restore the sacred place to the tribe. With eagles being prayer messengers, this area where they gather has always been a place of natural, cultural, and spiritual importance. The nation wants to create walking trails along the river and an education center where tribal citizens can share their history." In Oklahoma City, a 7-year-old Kickapoo boy had his hair cut off by 2 other students while at school. Andreas Garcia is a first grader in the Del City schools in Oklahoma. Andreas came home and showed his father, Jamil Garcia, that his hair was chopped off. After 3 weeks, the family received Andreas' hair back in a plastic bag. Jamil called the school immediately after the incident, but was told they could not do anything until after spring break. Garcia says that he feels like the school's leadership is just trying to sweep this under the rug.
I want something done. This ain't right. Yes, we did have our meetings about the thing, but I still feel like they don't get it. You know, I still feel like they want to sweep it under the rug still. And then they even had the nerve to say, "We would want Andres to come back. You don't have to keep." No, I don't want him at the school.
The parents did have a meeting with the administration of the school and were offered an apology. According to the family, officials at the school said they would be sending out a flyer to others at the school, educating them about the incident. They also plan on an Indigenous educator to come and speak to the students on Indigenous Peoples Day. The family still wants to pursue a case and will not be allowing their son to return back to the school. 3 women are roller skating across the country to raise awareness on environmental issues in Indian country. Daisy Purdy, who is Eastern Band of Cherokee, and Melissa Skeet, who is Dene, are joined by well-known roller derby skater Bonnie Thunder. The trio took off from Largo, Florida on Sunday. They plan on skating more than 2,000 miles to raise awareness about the disproportionate impacts of environmental contaminants on the health of Indigenous communities. Both Daisy and Melissa have skated long distances in the past to raise awareness about other issues facing Indigenous people. The three will finish this long-distance skate on April 9th. 3 Indigenous women will be featured on U.S. quarters. The United States Mint announced its 2023 American Woman Quarters Program honorees. Included are Maria Tallchief, who was an Osage ballerina, a native hula dancer named Edith Kanakana Ole, and Bessie Coleman Choctaw Cherokee, the first African-American and first Native American woman pilot. Wilma Mankiller, the first woman Cherokee principal chief, is featured on a 2022 quarter. The opposite side of each quarter will show President George Washington. To read more about this story, check out our website at IndianCountryToday.com and search for the headline, U.S. Quarter will feature 3 Indigenous women. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, an Indigenous memoir, plus gaming at Ho Chunk Nation. But first, we are learning about the toll of COVID-19. An Alaska Native woman holds Dr. Suzanne and Suzette LaFleche Professorship at the Public Health at the University of Nebraska Media College. Siobhan Wescott was the director of North Dakota's Indian into Medicine program before moving to Omaha. Welcome, Dr. Wescott.
Thank you.
You've held this position since July, just as it looked like the pandemic was over. But with new variants, we're still not in the clear. How has that affected your work?
It's been very difficult, I think, for everyone, not only just general safety concerns, but the ability, when you work with tribes, you really need to be in person, you need to show up. And with it not being safe to do so, it's been really tough to create those connections and kind of get to know what the priorities are of the tribes here in Nebraska. However, I've been getting my house in order at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And so that's, I've filled the time so that I'm really understand what's happening already at the university. And then when we're ready with the tribes, we can go.
This is so complicated now for people to figure out because you go from one jurisdiction that has a strict policy to one that has no policy, and trying to navigate that and try to stay safe. Are there any ways that we can think about this?
I think, we're still not quite out of the woods, and generally, and I know this is not always easy, but for those who can still continue to work remotely, that is the wise choice. And if you're just shopping or out and about, wearing a mask indoors is probably still wise. I think, if we're 3-4 months into a continued lull in cases, then, we can start to relax those things. But I just think it's best to be cautious.
This has put so much spotlight on the Indian health system, both the positive and the negative. On the positive side, we see how our public health system is much more intact than even the non-Indian system. On the other side, the disparity has been really remarkable. What have we learned kind of on the big picture from this, and how can we improve from a system level? Well,
I tell you, it's a tough time for Western medicine. I have a physician friend, she's become the primary care provider for both her parents because there isn't anyone else available. So there have been lots of physicians leaving. It's been hard to get care and normal things like cancer screenings, depending, at times they were actually halted because that was considered elective or optional activities. And so, there's a lot of ways that the pandemic, even if you didn't get COVID, has affected your ability to get good health care. So, and the Indian Health Service has always struggled between 20 to 25% of positions are vacant in the Indian Health Service, and that was pre-pandemic.
Well, in fact, that whole idea, I mean, you look at one thing I don't think people realize, and we're running a series on economics right now, is how significant employment is in the healthcare industry. It's really the largest employer. And to get our next generation ready for that is a huge challenge because the opportunities are there. We just need the skills and the training.
Absolutely.
What are the special challenges for Nebraska and other Plains tribes during this era?
Well, I think we face the same challenges that most of the country do. We have leadership that is a little too quick to pull public health measures like mask mandates, if they allowed them at all at times, and just general ability to get materials that you need, personal protective equipment and the like, all the supply chain issues that we hear about, that's extra problematic for healthcare. So there's just lots of issues that we're facing. And I do say, yet the Ponca tribe here in Nebraska just opened a new clinic in Lincoln in the midst of all of this. They had the groundbreaking ceremony last week. So some good things are happening, but there's just lots of challenges right now.
One of the things I've noticed in going back and reading what happened in 1919 is how there was almost a collective amnesia about everything. People wanted to forget and move on. And I think this time there's more of a sense that we need to remember and memorialize and plan. How is that changing the future for pandemics?
Well, I'm actually working on a project that I think could be healing, because we certainly need that. There's been a lot of loss during the pandemic and not the usual ways to mourn. So I'm starting a COVID memorial project that's based on the AIDS quilt. So there'll be a quilt or some sort of standard size if someone wants to make art to memorialize a loved one who's lost, but also a digital side. And that type of thing I could see doing for students, having something, if they didn't lose a loved one, just maybe making a quilt square with just masks and having all of the classes that they had to wear masks for listed on there. So that type of thing we can remember like why this was important and why that we don't forget and just say, oh, we'll never need to wear masks again. It's all behind us.
That's so important. Thank you, Dr. Wescott. A new memoir by the chairman of the Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria is out this week. Greg Cyrus joins us today. It's been 25 years since his last publication. He's probably most known for his book, Grand Avenue, which became a 1996 HBO series that won many awards. He's serving his 14th term as chairman of the tribe, which was formerly known as the Federated Coast Miwok. We have a video that's based on chapters from the book. Let's take a look.
Summer. Something about the glare of noon, or nearabouts noon, because summertime, that hour feels like eternity, the essence of the season itself, halfway between here and there, stopped. Something about the stillness of light and the motionless surface of the green river. My family traces its history to the river. As indigenous people in Sonoma and Mendocino counties, we all do. My great-great-great-grandmother Supu was born near Petaluma. Her son, who was Tom Smith, would later build his ceremonial roundhouse on the Jenner Head. There, he preached about the importance of remembering our traditions, the rules of living with the land. Pointing to the river, he said, like that water, we are connected to everything, its memory.
Welcome, Chairman Cyrus.
Good to be here. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me, Mark.
And congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
What should readers know about this? What's the most compelling part to pass on?
Well, I think it's been billed much as a memoir, and it's a memoir in essays, but it's essays about place, the way I negotiate place here. And I think more and more, always American Indian literature, but what distinguishes us so often is that we write from a place. We are people from a place rather than people who've come to a place. And I think that my memoir is a way to dialogue with the thousands of years of history, including today and the future of the place where I was born and where my ancestors are from. So it's an attempt to get a broad perspective of place, which I feel, Mark, is needed today more than ever.
Well, and you think about the arc of history, and really for the United States, we're talking about 3 centuries, which is about this much history compared to this arc of tens of thousands or thousands years. And that connection to place is something that really, like you say, when you think about climate change or some of the issues we're facing today, is extraordinarily relevant.
If you don't know and you're not familiar with place and you don't establish some kind of relationship with it, how are you going to feel a responsibility for it? And once we know it, as we have been here for time immemorial in our Aboriginal places, our Aboriginal landscapes, we have learned how important to respect and be responsible for the place we live in. Today, with mobile cultures, mobile ways of life, we pass the trees by, we pass the rocks, the mountains by. We're not connected and don't know the ways in which we need to be responsible. And as I said a moment before, Mark, more than ever, there is that need. One of my great aunts, my ancestors, said in the 50s, 1950s, all you kids are leaving all the things we're teaching on the ground like clothes scattered about. She said, one day, the white people are going to be coming back to us and saying, how do we live here? What do we do? And she said, don't forget these things, because they'll be looking to us for ways to survive, which of course is happening today.
This is such an extraordinary era for Native storytelling, partly because it's gone so mainstream in the sense that networks are picking it up, books are popular, people are talking about it in ways. What does that say about American society? I mean, this is something that should have happened a long, long time ago.
Well, there's many ways to read that, but positive in the broader scope of a lot of the, as a result of civil rights and social justice and those kinds of things. Luckily, the media is feeling more and more a responsibility to do the things that you have been doing for a long time, the broader media. But a more cynical read is that many people are interested. They, especially when it comes to American Indian literature and thought, is more and more they realize they have to pay attention to us. They need to pay attention to us. And of course, we've always done, we'll take the high road and do what we can.
Well, indeed, I think it's pretty clear you cannot be really someone who has an understanding of this country without understanding Indigenous history, at least the headlines, nothing else.
Yeah, particularly here in California. Everything west of the Rockies, I used to joke until there were casinos here, nobody knew there were California Indians here. And you know that Los Angeles, there's always been more Indian people here, but Los Angeles hosts the largest urban population of American Indians, and Oakland, the second largest. We're here in great numbers, but we've been invisible,
I want to ask you about Mabel McKay, and someone mentioned in the book a lot. And what was what did you learn from her?
Everything, Mark, that's a big, wonderful question, but I'll give you a small answer and then start going on a bit, but everything that is important in my life. That woman, she was a renowned basket weaver, a medicine woman, and really kind of an appendage, if you will, to the old way of thinking, the ancient way. She was the last of our sucking doctors and dreamers and prophets out here in this area here. And as I like to say, she had more wisdom. She had hardly a second grade education, but she had more wisdom in her little finger than all the professors I knew at Stanford put together. And she taught me, again, that, and it saved my life in so many ways, Mark. She taught me early on that there was always something bigger than me, that the world was always bigger. And she told me early on that, with all the difficult things that have happened to me or whatever, you still have two choices, just as she did. You could become hateful and poison yourself or poison other people, or you can use what's happened to doctor and heal others. She said, you've already got hate, try the other. And in the best moments of my life, I've tried the other to share the stories, to do what I can as a teacher, as a tribal leader. She told me when I was 19 years old, she pinned a prayer basket on me, and she said, and I was a pretty wild kid, and she said to me, "You're going to be a leader among the people. This is to protect you." And I thought, "Oh yeah, old lady, and the sun's going to come up on the west." Well, maybe she fixed me or did whatever, hoodooed me, but 30 years as a tribal chairman. So,
Well, Chairman Cyrus, thank you so much. What a wonderful story. Thank you for joining us.
thank you for having me.
We continue our At the Crossroads special report by examining the enterprises owned by the Ho-Chunk Nation. This reporting brings together the Institute for Nonprofit News and 9 other news partners, all in an effort to answer the question, what is the state of the economy in Indian country? Mario Karan is a reporter at Wisconsin Watch. His recent story called We've Got to Get Out of the Gaming Out of Our Blood looked at how the pandemic affected the Ho-Chunk Nation's 6 casinos in Wisconsin. Welcome, Mario.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
What's the takeaway from your stories?
The takeaway, I would say, was the pandemic truly illustrated the need to diversify economies and move beyond just gaming for tribal nations. I think this was a question that was on the hearts and minds of tribal nations, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country. And the temporary closures, at least in Wisconsin, for casinos, really made more urgent this question of finding other sources of revenue.
How big of a driver are the casinos in Wisconsin?
Well, they're a major driver for the tribes, and they are a driver, an economic engine for the state of Wisconsin to a smaller degree. For tribes, they generate collectively over $1 billion a year. And during the 2020 shutdown, when the pandemic arrived, that dropped to under $1 billion to around 890 million. So what that looked like, it manifested in layoffs to government employees or tribal government employees, and of course, employees at the casino. So there's still, the Ho-Chunk Nation in Wisconsin is still making efforts to recover from this. A lot of those employees have not been brought back, and they are attempting to restore the services, some of which were cut because of the loss of revenue.
I think that's such an important distinction for tribal gaming, is that the profits go to service government and programs, whereas in private sector gaming, it would go to shareholders.
Correct. The profits from gaming truly help drive social services, education services. Without a traditional tax base, or tax base is the dominant culture state of Wisconsin would have. This gaming revenue truly funds a lot of the services that a lot of the tax revenue would have otherwise funded.
One of the things going on in the gambling industry is a shift to sports betting and other online forms of betting. How are the Wisconsin tribes looking at that?
Well, in order to get into sports gaming in Wisconsin, tribes have to renegotiate their compacts or their agreements with the state of Wisconsin. At least three so far have been able to do so, and those are up and running at various locations. So it is on the horizon. It's on the horizon for Ho-Chunk. For the Ho-Chunk Nation, they're looking at getting into it, but they're just a bit behind the other 3 tribes in Wisconsin that are already moving forward on this. But it is seen as an avenue for the future and a way to bolster some of that gaming revenue.
What are some of the ways the tribes are talking about in terms of diversification and strategies to move in that direction?
Yeah, so this has been a question, as I mentioned, on the minds of various tribes in Wisconsin. Some have had better luck than others at trying to diversify. There's one tribe, Lake Superior Band, Chippewa, and Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin, that got into the practice of payday lending. They weren't the actual lenders, but they were sort of a pass-through. in that lending practice, but that was seen as predatory, and they've been ensnared in litigation. The Ho-Chunk with respect to the Ho-Chunk, they've had a number of enterprises that they've looked to a brand of bottled water, which they weren't able to break into bigger markets for. So they've had a number of things that they've tried with little success, but some have been able to make headway. The Menominee tribe in Wisconsin has been able to capitalize on sawmills and lumber production, lumber processing, and they're getting into maple syrup production. But I think probably one of the biggest areas of promise really comes back to the land, land which can be used as an economic driver through leasing for commercial and agricultural purposes. And I think just to quote Ho-Chunk President Marlon White Eagle, this is it's the way of the future. Agriculture and turning back to the land is really where he sees promise and for jobs of the future.
Mario Karan, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I'm Mark Trahant, filling in today for Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.